Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Glick. And if this is your first time joining us, each week when you tune in, you'll hear a couple different types of shows. Sometimes when you tune in, you're going to hear industry news. That's where we pull up a few different headlines on the screen and we talk about what it means for the land development industry. Then other times we have interview style shows, and that's where we have on somebody associated with the land development industry. We talk about their origin story and we dig into some of the projects that they have going on. And today I'm excited to have with me Dr. Lee Newton. Dr. Lee Newton is an optometrist and a real estate developer. Lee, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. We always start because I'm always interested, and I think other people who listen in are interested in, how did you get into the real estate world? And you, obviously, your background is maybe a little bit different in your path and everything. Can you walk us through how you got into the real estate space?
Yeah, sure. I was always interested in it. I always loved real estate, and I was immersed in it first from the investment perspective, knowing that real estate pays us five different ways as an investment, and it's got so many advantages over Wall Street. So I kind of cut my teeth as a real estate investor doing the old quintessential, tenants and toilets model of used homes, and that just got I just got kind of burnt with that. And then by virtue of the fact that I needed to be my own general contractor for commercial projects with my own office building, I couldn't afford to hire a GC for every project that I had to do. I got a little bit more immersed in it, excuse me, as a contractor. I got my own contractor's license, and I ended up putting up a building with two other partners about 6 years ago, and then helping design and put up a building for others. And then once I was more immersed in the development, I just couldn't turn back. It was just too much fun. So I guess you could say I'm an eye doctor with atypical hobbies.
Yeah, well, I'm curious then, when you started getting into real estate, what was your influence behind it? Like, were there certain, key figures out there that were kind of helping guide you, or what was your path, or how did you find your way through all the different, there's different pieces that, having a mentor, having somebody guide you through that process can help speed up. Did you have anything like that, or was it kind of trial and error?
It was probably more trial and error. I mean, there are a few key figures along the way. I guess for the most part, I sought out my own influencers and learned from them either by taking courses from them or studying publications that they had written and making some mistakes. They say good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. So, with that in mind, I have a lot of experience.
Yeah, so how do you, when you're doing a project or thinking about, what you might be doing next, having different investors that you go in on a project with, how do you go about finding the right, investor partners when you go into a project? Is it something where you have prior connections with people, or are you seeking out certain people who have kind of common goals when it comes to an investment, asset class?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is typically someone that I have a prior connection and relationship with. I haven't done any large syndication projects. I'm not averse to that, but I don't know that the economy is going to be great for multifamily syndication for a while yet, just based on several factors, and I don't have a ton of experience. So I'll do projects with more of JV with one or two other partners. I do have a couple collaboration partners, Jeremy Lemire in Wisconsin and Michael Parks in Boston, and they have respectively some experience with uh, multifamily and large storage unit operator, and they actually have a fund that they put together. So we're going to be working together and probably doing a fair amount of build to rent projects in the next couple of years.
Nice, nice. And I guess we didn't touch on this at the beginning, but where are you based out of?
I'm in Bay City, Michigan, which is
Okay,
kind of midway up the Lower Peninsula on the east side. There's a bay, it's called the Saginaw Bay, and we're right on that.
okay, nice. And so, looking at some of the projects that you have worked on in the past, you mentioned about 6 years ago, one of the projects that you worked on. Can we talk through some of the different development projects that you've gone through, and maybe some of the challenges that you faced along the way?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. My first project that I was a general contractor for is we put up a single story commercial office building here about a quarter mile down the road from my main office building. And the circumstances that led to that were, excuse me, the local DDA had owned the land and they were offering the land free if someone would develop it. And so myself and another longtime friend slash real estate partner and another eye surgeon got together and we said, well, hey, if we can build a nice commercial building and if we can rent it and we get the land free, this is it's going to be a no lose situation here. So we learned a lot from that, and that was immediately pre-pandemic. So we broke ground in the fall of 2018 and we got it finished. So we had 3 leases signed before we broke ground. That's what made it a no-brainer with the bank. Broke ground, got it finished in the summer of 19. 3 tenants moved in. We had about 3,000 square feet remaining, kind of white box conditions, if you will, and 2 suites ideally, or one big suite. And it took us until, bear with me now, it was September of 22 before the second to last tenant moved in, and February of 23 before the final tenant moved in. So it took that long to stabilize it, the absorption rate, and the pandemic definitely contributed to that because more people working from home and so forth. But it was an interesting experience because we had learned a lot from our architect friend. He sadly passed away about a week after we broke ground, but we learned a lot about the design process and laying out a building on a property and designing it for vehicular access, the utilities, that sort of thing. His name was Fred, and always have fond memories of him. Learned so much from him. He designed a home for me that I'm building right now. Actually, going to be my summer home, then my retirement home in the future. But one thing that he said to me, and this pertains to either a home or a commercial building, there's one way a structure can fit on that property to satisfy all the needs that you want. If it's a home, is there an eyesore that you want to block? Like one of the neighbors to the back has an ugly garage that they're never going to fix and paint. You want to block that. Is there waterfront that you want to maximize, or the trees that you don't want to get rid of? How is the so there's one way something can fit on that property to maximize all the affected variables. So I did learn quite a bit from him in that.
Nice. It's pretty amazing, having these conversations and hearing about, just the impact that, 2020 had on the office space, and just and now we're starting to see, certain changes that are happening with businesses either coming back full time in office or doing a hybrid approach, or whatever that looks like. So it's definitely been a really interesting thing to follow and see what that's going to look like long term. I don't think anybody expects it to go back to the way it was, but at the same time, I think I, at least personally, have been a little surprised at how many companies have made the shift to go back to the office like full time, no, not hybrid, but basically saying, "Hey, we need everybody back into the office." Surprised only because I thought more businesses would keep it that way, but not surprised from a culture standpoint and some of the benefits that you get from being in person with your colleagues and everything.
It's so much easier if you're in a board meeting, for example, to be engaged if you're in person.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. On the project, so you mentioned a multifamily project that you've been involved in. Is that one that you can talk about as well?
Yeah, so I want to make sure that I didn't misspeak myself. I haven't done any multifamily
Okay,
syndication, okay,
got it.
but I'm actually building a duplex right now in a college town, really close to the finish line with one partner. So that is the
Okay,
technically the multifamily project that I'm working on right now.
nice, nice. And so with that project that you're working through, how has that differed from some of the other ones that you've done previously? Has it been kind of a similar starting point of how you wanted the project to go, and similar people involved in the planning and everything, and just a different end purpose of what it's going to look like? Or how have you seen it different from some of the other projects you've worked on?
Well, and honestly, this duplex is the first residential project that I will have done from start to finish, other than
Yeah.
smaller rehab projects. And it's taken a lot longer than it should have taken, and that's is another check mark in the experience column
Yeah.
and bad judgment and learning some lessons from it. What can we do better next time? The design of this project is a little bit different. It's a design that I came up with based on, back to that commercial building. A couple quick stories related to that. We got the land free, but we had to strip about 3 feet of organic matter and bring in 4 feet of sand. That gets a little expensive. And so our excavating bill was slightly under $200,000 for this building. And so and the building itself is 176 feet long. So the entire south wall, we had good soil compaction until that wall. Then we did not. So we had to dig it 2 feet deeper and 4 feet wider and bring in like $30,000 of stone. That was kind of another oops. But you can't not do that stuff because you don't want to have your building sinking in 5 years and wish you
Yeah.
would have done it right. So, with that in mind, and the pandemic made me a little bit nerdier than I usually am anyway. I studied. I've always liked helical piles. So the big steel screws that go into earth that can support a lot of weight. So this duplex design, we designed it to be supported by concrete piers and helical piles. It's a totally above ground. It's a raised structure about 3 feet up,
Mm.
and then it's what I call a value engineered design. So I have these single family home designs that are 1, 2, and 3 bedroom and duplex versions of all the above. And I took the duplex version of the 3 bedroom and recognizing that college kids, my older daughter's one of them, they probably want their own restroom, their own bathroom connected to their bedroom and ensuite more than they want a huge common living room living area. We just took that 3 bedroom design and made the two non-master bedrooms en suites, and we just took 10 feet off the living area, and they still have a pretty generous living area with a cathedral ceiling and whatnot. So it's elevated, it's totally air sealed, energy efficient, it's heated and cooled with air source heat pump, and I mean, I'm proud of the design. We spent a little bit more than I thought we were going to, which is probably always the case. I was hoping to be at or below 150 a square on this project. I think we're a little bit above that. Final numbers are TBD, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're about 160 a square. But because of the firewall, because of the duplex version, and so forth, there's a couple things that did increase the cost. I think we can do these in a single family model for under 150 a square, going forward.
Nice. And so one of the things too that I noticed when I was just doing a little digging on, some of the things that you have going on. So obviously you have your primary profession, and then you've been in real estate now for a number of years. And what are some of the things you're doing on the real estate side? So it looks like you've definitely focused on your brand, your personal brand, and everything on the real estate side of things. Is there do you have kind of a desire on that side of of what you're working on to be able to kind of show other people how to get started? And is it people who are maybe professionals in, whether they're doctors, lawyers, or whatever that looks like, of how to get into the real estate space? Is that kind of your niche that you're going after? What's that look like?
One niche. I like to help other professionals save money on their offices. So I have my two partners. We put up that building. I helped a couple that owns a therapy practice put up their building, and we based their design on our building because we already had the prints, and we could make simple modifications to the prints. And they were working with a larger company, a design build firm that they were about $1 million apart on the budget, and
Mm,
it was their first build, and their landlord knew me and knew that I had just put up that building, and they said, "Hey, talk to Lee because he knows what this stuff costs." And so we were able to shave about $1 million or so off the initial pro forma, and do it with the same, kind of same concept, same rectangular box. So if you have a building that's designed that has 8 corners like a cross, okay, think about the excavation, think about the footing, think about the rat wall, think about the framing and the superstructure. Every step of the way, you're costing yourself more. Have you really put up a building that's a monument to the architect that designed it? Maybe, maybe not. Has the architect followed your instructions that you've given him or her? Maybe, maybe not. So save them a lot of money, help that go from concept to completion. And that was fun because, to me, it's always about victory for the little guy, right? Because I'll
Yeah.
always be a little guy. And then I recently helped an eye doctor friend of mine who bought a building. He'd rented his entire career and he wanted to own his own. He needed more space, and it took a little longer than it should have. But acquisition costs, total remodel. The only thing we didn't do was the roof because the shingles were fine. Like new interior walls, busting up the floor. Think 115 a square, brand new building. I think that's pretty good because I don't think you can build new commercial for any less than 225 at the best these days. So I like helping others with that in mind, and I don't mind showing others, how it works too. I think doctors and healthcare people are quick to like abdicate responsibility for those types of decisions because a builder knows more, an architect knows more in their mind, and some of these things are not rocket science to understand. They
Yeah.
know their own discipline well. They're board certified or certified to do what they do in the healthcare realm. It's not that hard to learn this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you see a lot of people in those professions put money into real estate projects. They don't necessarily. A lot of times, you know it's putting money in, but not necessarily being a part of the process, right? It's just, hey, we want to go in on this deal and put in a certain amount of money, and then obviously just be the money behind it versus getting into it. So it was really interesting to me, kind of how you're operating, and that you have GC, these some of these projects and going through it, and so knowing that we do have a wide variety of people who listen to the show, we have people who have who are part of the big organizations that all they do is focus on development or, focus on a certain part of the development process. But then we also have people listening in who may do certain real estate deals just on the side as something that they're working through. So that's why I was just curious how how you interact with other people and how you like to participate and help others. And so that's kind of where that question came from.
Certainly. I'm helping a friend right now. He's a very successful business owner in the landscape and property management realm. And he bought an infill lot and he wants to do a spec home on it. And my involvement might be limited to helping him with the foundation, helping him with the insulation, but helping him just kind of manage the project. Um, Everything's coming up more than what we want in terms of expense. My goal is to get some of these single family projects down to about 125 a square, but I just don't see that unless A, we scale it and do 10 or 20 at a time, which maybe
Right.
we will with my friends Michael and Jeremy and their fund. We can easily do that. Or B, we self-perform a little bit more work or maybe some combination of each, right? There's
Yeah.
just certain things that like I'm never going to be a good drywall guy. Like I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm just that's a learning curve and I don't have an electrical license and a plumbing license, so you can't really do that anyways if you're a GC, but you can do some things to shape. I mean, we're looking at if we panelize the wall sections and built them in a controlled environment, would we save a little bit there? And that's a question we got to talk to our framers and see if we did that and provided space for them to do that, could we bring the cost down a little bit more?
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Let's shift gears a little bit into so we do a segment on the show called the lightning round, and I've got a few questions here that are interested to get your take on. And as you go through these, we try to keep them at like under a minute if you can. Basically, ends up being good, just quick hitter type questions. But at the same time, I'm not going to cut you off, so
No
we'll
problem.
we'll go through it. All right. So first question, and you might have touched on this one earlier, but what's the most important characteristic of any structure in your opinion?
Well, I would say that given that a structure that passes code review, plan review, and then ultimately inspection, we know it's not going to fall down, right?
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, looking at the big picture of energy efficiency and green and sustainable building, I would say air tightness. It's
Okay.
got to be the most important because when a cubic foot of air leaks in, Number one, it's probably not at the desired temperature that you're trying to maintain the interior space. Number two, it carries stuff with it. Some stuff could be contaminants, other stuff could be moisture, then it condenses and that causes bad things. So
Yeah.
I'd go with airtightness.
All right. Second one, knowing that you have, multiple projects you're working through, where would you put your next funds that you have, your next 100K or whatever into a project?
I would actually buy well positioned raw land that would be poised for development when a project fell into place, because there's no more earth than what exists right now. There's one can make the argument there's redevelopment, and I'm just not as passionate residentially about redevelopment. I mean, how much would it take to do a deep energy retrofit? You'd be better off just starting from scratch. I'm in favor of it, but somebody else doing it. It's just not my passion.
Yeah.
So I would put it in raw land. I heard something recently, and I can't remember who was being interviewed, but someone was saying that particularly Ohio and Michigan are going to become even more popular because they're somewhat insulated from the temperature extremes from climate change, as well as the proximity to water.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. All right, third one here. What is the biggest mistake that you've made, and how can others avoid it?
Biggest mistake that I've made, probably, I'd have to go along with my wife on this one. And this is not something she said, but this is something that she would say if she was here and you asked her the question, is trying to do too much myself. You know, I like to get my hands dirty. I like to roll up my sleeves. I like to, if I can do it, why hire somebody else to do it? I gotta learn to delegate a little bit more and be a little bit more organized in that. I'm too anxious to tackle something myself that I should have others do.
Yeah, I am guilty of that many times as well.
Yeah.
So I get it. All right, fourth one here. Um, what are your thoughts on the current economic conditions? And I know things are just ever evolving and all of that, but do you see any type of crash coming?
That's a great question. And, I don't have any groundbreaking novel thoughts on that. I will say what I have heard others say that makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm not going to take credit for these. I'm going to give credit where it's due. Keith Weinhold says we already had a housing crash, and it was a housing supply crash, and it started in the spring of 2020. Keith Weinhold, Get Rich Education. Jason Hartman, Creating Wealth, says, and he's a very, very strong believer in that, there's no way we're going to have a housing crash because there's one indispensable ingredient for a housing crash, that is millions of distressed sellers.
Mm,
Right now, we don't have distressed sellers because any seller is sitting comfy at either 40 some percent have no mortgage. Okay, a lot have 3, 4, 5%. They're not distressed. The wannabe buyers is distressed because the wannabe buyer either gets outbid when the housing price gets bid beyond the asking price, or they're stretching to make things work with an interest rate and thus a payment that they can marginally afford. So I agree that the housing inventory now, various professionals will tell you that we're 1 million units short or 5 million units short. I don't know the answer to that, but we're short on starter homes, and a starter home should not cost 3 to 400K.
yeah. Yeah, and I think for those of you listening in too, I like to whenever we talk about things that are economy related, I like to put in some context to the fact that, when we record these episodes, we're usually like a month out from when they're released. So something could happen between this moment now and when this is released that may change Lee's answer, but I think that's just important to note. All right, last one here. So, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'll ask it anyway. Why is real estate your preferred asset class?
You know, I love real estate for many reasons. It pays you in a multiplicity of ways. You can buy it with leverage. I mean, it's got so many benefits over Wall Street. Um, I like the different asset classes, commercial, residential. I like, value engineering is a term I may not have used yet in our discussion here today, but that's one of my favorite things to do is take a project like my friend's office building or the couple that own the therapy center, figure out what are we trying to accomplish, what is our budget, how can we do it on a lower budget than what we think we can, how can we do it for less without cutting corners, without cutting quality. So I just love the value engineering realm. How can we make a structure, in the case of my residential designs, even more energy efficient? We don't even have, and this is not meant to evoke any political incite any political debate or anything like that. There's nothing like the calculator on my desk. Okay, the second law of thermodynamics works the same in Alaska, Michigan, and Florida. So some people might say, well, you can't cool a home in Florida with a heat pump. You can't heat a home in Alaska with a heat pump. Ask the heat pump experts. What do they tell you? It all depends on your thermal envelope. So that's my favorite aspect of it. It's probably a little bit long and convoluted answer to your question, but that's probably the main reason I love real estate.
Yeah. No, it is interesting, and it's also interesting to, you think about just the industry at large, and you don't want to see the industry get into the because we've always done it that way mindset, because there are many opportunities, especially in this day and age. We're always looking for ways to reduce the cost, of these projects, especially on the residential side. Trying to produce affordable housing, and we have to get creative with some of those ways and how we can do that. And so through your value engineering that you're talking about is a great way to maybe uncover some new ways or think differently about projects and everything. So no, I like that term, and I like that you brought that up.
If only it could make material costs come down.
Right. Yes, yes, if only. Well, I think we're at a good spot here to come to a close. I'm wondering, what's the best way for people that are listening in to get in touch with you personally, or learn more about you? Do you have a website or something, or a social media? What's the best way?
Well, more than likely, your listeners have a good eye doctor in the town where they live, so they probably wouldn't care about my eye care practice website. I have a personal website, drleenewton.com, drleenewton.com, and I'd encourage them to visit it and then download a copy of the ebook that I wrote this year. It's called A New Housing Paradigm, and perhaps you can put the download link in the show notes. I can get that to you. And that talks about my value engineered home designs and where I think we need to go from here.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. I will do that if you send that over. And, as always, contact information will be in the show notes as well for those of you listening in. So you'll be able to go down in the description of this episode, and it'll be right there, or on the link that will take you to the show notes page where you can get to Lee's website, and also a link to that ebook. So, with that, we'll come to a close. Really appreciate you hopping on and sharing your background in real estate and how you got into it and everything. And again, for those of you listening in, if you're not already subscribed to the show and you're just listening in for the first time, I'd appreciate you clicking that subscribe button. And we will talk to you again next week. Thank you.